My dear, go forward with faith in your own self. You can do it, you know.
Meet Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo, the most inspiring woman I've encountered. This is the journey of a British woman who found her path far from home, in the heart of Tibetan Buddhism. To fully appreciate it, we'll need to step into a world shaped by reincarnation and destiny. But no matter your beliefs, I hope her life story moves you as much as it did me. When I got to Dharamshala, Himachal Pradesh, I felt yet again like I was in another country. Only this time, there is a pretty solid reason why it didn't feel like the rest of India. In 1950, China invaded Tibet and has maintained control ever since. By 1959, the Dalai Lama, Tibet's spiritual leader, was forced into exile in Dharamshala, which is why today it looks so much like Tibet. The situation in Tibet remains dire. UN experts reported that over 1 million Tibetan children have been separated from their families in an attempt to erase their linguistic, religious, and cultural ties. Buddhist monasteries are also being demolished. And recently, monks and nuns were expelled from Larangar, the world's largest Buddhist center. In short, what they are destroying is Tibetan identity itself. But here in Dharamshala, you see that it hasn't been erased yet, as this place has become home to a large population of Tibetan refugees and their government in exile. The moment I felt most transported to Tibet was while watching a long life offering ceremony for His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
I was fortunate enough to attend it, and witnessing the richness of Tibetan culture so vividly, knowing it's now under threat, was profoundly moving. As you may know, Tibet is a land of profound spiritual heritage, where Buddhism has deeply shaped the culture for centuries. I won't dive into all the complexities of Tibetan Buddhism, but at its core, what's appealing to me is the idea that true happiness comes from within, and that everyone has the potential for enlightenment, which is spiritual awakening. The less appealing part is that in the meantime, we're trapped in samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, experiencing suffering because we haven't yet realized the deeper truths about existence. But what struck me the most wasn't just the idea of reincarnation. It was the belief that consciousness itself transcends the physical body and brain. Interestingly, recent neuroscience is starting to entertain similar ideas.
It turns out there is a scientific revolution going on now about the mind-brain discussion, the relationship between the two. What we would say is the brain is a reducing valve or filter that allows primordial consciousness in. That is, the brain is not the creator of it. You cannot explain all of the details of human experience. The evidence for things like reincarnation, past life memories in children, indicative of reincarnation, things like that, if you think the brain is the producer of consciousness.
As the idea of reincarnation is central to Tibetan Buddhism, I wanted to explore it further before meeting with Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo. While exploring Dharamshala, I realized there was no better place to get answers from people deeply knowledgeable on the subject. So I headed to the Dalai Lama temple, where I had the privilege to speak with two highly respected scholars close to His Holiness, Geshe Tenzin Takla, his secretary and spokesman for over 20 years, and Geshe Tashi Tsering, the abbot of Saramay Monastery, and I promise you could practically feel the wisdom in the air.
My general suggestion is to have inner value, something that we can trust, something valuable internally.
I was eager to understand if consciousness could be the bridge between lifetimes.
Certain layers or levels of consciousnesses are going to cease when this body ceases its function, but more subtle level, more deeper levels of consciousnesses will not, according to the Buddhist understanding, will not cease, will not stop.
When you talk about people getting reincarnated, consciousness going on and on, They have memories of their past life, right?
Yeah.
So even though it is not the same personality, there is something that remains.
Habits. In Buddha Dharma, the consciousness continue, and then the imprints, the latencies, the potentials that you put on the consciousness gets carried onto the next life.
It seems like I had the right intuition, and it was an honor to discuss it with someone who has dedicated over 20 years to the study of Buddhist philosophy. So of course, I never expected our conversation to take a personal turn.
Even when your brain is destroyed after cremation, the mind continues to exist. Now you might wonder, how do you know that? Based on my own personal experience, my younger brother in Tibet died. But the reincarnation of my younger brother is still alive. In the midst of many fields, he pointed, this is our field. He said, my name is Dundu, the wife of his previous life, saying, she's my wife. He was only 3 or 4 at that time. He pointed to my father's forehead, and there was a scar here. He said, now the wound is properly healed. And then my father asked him, what wound? And he said, when I started my tractor, the trigger came off. It hit you there, and you bled profusely at that time. And even my mother didn't know that. And then he looked at our current house in Tibet and asked my mother, do you know who built this house? And my mother, just out of curiosity, asked him, who do you think built this house? And he said, I did it. And then my mother further questioned him, how did you do that? And he said, first our house was on the other side of the river. Then our old house was destroyed. It was all good wood, so we brought them to here. And how did you bring them? On your back or no? I brought them on my tractor. So many evidence that you cannot say this child is lying. If he has been taught to say that, then he will not emotionally connect to his previous life. When you confront him, tell him that you are not to do, he will cry. So how do you explain that?
Of course, I can't explain that, and it's not my place to try. I prefer to just observe. Like this tree growing through solid cement. It seems impossible, yet there it stood right before my eyes. And as fate would have it, it's a Bodhi tree, the same type under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. Growing in the middle of a grave. Not just any grave, but that of Kamchul Rinpoche, Tenzin Palmo's guru. Actually, I should say the 8th Kamchul Rinpoche. Indeed, the Kamchuls are a whole lineage of Buddhist masters who have been reincarnated through the centuries. So when her master passed away at 49, Tenzin Palmo met him again, this time at just 2 years old. Today, the 9th Kamchul Rinpoche is 44, and I had the chance of seeing him during a special event at Tashijong. We've all heard stories about soulmates or destiny and wondered if it's real. Well, in Buddhist belief, we form karmic bonds that sometimes carry over from one life to the next. A perfect example of this is the connection between Kamchul Rinpoche and Tenzin Palmo, who recognized each other instantly when she met him. She described it as if seeing someone she had known forever but hadn't seen in ages, and like the deepest part of her being had suddenly taken form in front of her. At the time, she was only 21 and had left Great Britain for India, where she was ordained as a nun just a few weeks later. What followed was remarkable. Jetsunma Tenzin Palmo spent 12 years in retreat, meditating in a remote cave in the Himalayas under extremely harsh conditions, with temperatures dropping below -30 degrees.
You can just sit as in a meditation posture, but you cannot lie down. That she did for 12 years.
What's even more impressive about her journey is that she accomplished all this not only as a Westerner, but also as a woman. For centuries, nuns from Tibet and the Himalayas were excluded from the teachings and trainings given to monks, as gender equality remains a bit of a foreign concept in these communities. And she experienced that firsthand.
And also being female and the only nun, I didn't belong anywhere. I mean, I saw it when male Westerners came, how they were treated. and how much teachings they were given, even if they weren't even Buddhists, just because they were males.
In Buddhist tradition, we are told that it's impossible for a female or a woman to attain Buddhahood. Yeah, we have to transform into a male body to become a Buddha.
To fill this gap, when she returned, she founded the DGL Nunnery to empower nuns by offering them the same opportunities as monks.
People ask if I was lonely in the cave, but I wasn't lonely in the cave. I was very lonely when I lived in the community.
So these are some reasons why she's one of the most respected voices in the Buddhist world today. Personally, what I see is someone who bridges the gap between the East and West, making her insights relatable to those outside of closed Buddhist communities. She's deeply grounded in the modern world and speaks directly to the challenges we all face today. She's also straightforward and clear, and talking with her about the true nature of the mind felt like everything was coming together.
And so when we talk about dissolving the ego, it's not really saying that ego is a bad thing in itself. So it means that we just have to recognize that we are not just that.
Exactly. The problem is our identification with the ego. I mean, we need a sense of self in order to function in the world, right? You know, if moment to moment to moment there's no self, there's nothing to hold it together in cohesion. We have to function on a relative level. The problem comes when we think that this is truly who we are and we limited ourselves to that. Because our sense of self is very small, very tiny. And it's like we're imprisoned in this little box. Little me divides us from other beings. This is the dualistic conceptual mind. Says there's me and everything else which is not me. And so we are always isolated and lonely inside. And my problems are me, right? Why are we so absorbed in ourselves? Because our sense of ego is not healthy. In the true nature of the mind, which is beyond our conceptual dualistic thought, is our non-dual awareness, our knowing, just the pure knowing mind, interconnects us. And we recognize we're all part of a very deep, interpenetrating web, and not alone and out in the dark like we feel we are.
And so when you're talking about knowing, what are you referring to exactly?
Consciousness. The knowing. I mean, what is consciousness? Consciousness is the knowing quality of the mind. It's beyond thought, because thought always has to make something small, right? And so by its very nature, it's beyond conceptual thinking. It's got nothing to do with the brain, right? It completely bypasses the brain.
Since it is beyond conceptual thinking, I'll leave it at that. But her wisdom shows us that no matter where we come from or what we believe, we're all linked by our shared humanity. And in a world that often feels divided, hearing about the interconnectedness of all human beings is refreshing. In that spirit, I wanted to end on a question that could speak to everyone, Buddhist or not. What advice would you give to the new generations?
I think that it's a very difficult time to be born, especially nowadays. People are becoming more and more socially isolated, and they look into the future and they don't see much ahead. But I think it doesn't help to get caught up in despondency. And that, on the other hand, now more than ever, there is access to spiritual paths and to recognizing that our happiness and unhappiness really depends on our mind. We can't maybe change everything on the outside. What we can change is our relationship with what is going on the outside, right? That we can do. We can change ourselves. And more how to do it is available out there. So find a method of going forward that speaks to yourself and stick to it. And in that way you will not only benefit yourself, but also you can then be of great benefit for others. Because we need the young people of today. You're the future, right? I'm already old and finished. You're the future. And so it's up to you young people who are looking and asking questions and searching to come up with some good answers and encourage yourself and your friends and society eventually to look for the true answer to the world's problems inside their own mind. inside their own heart, heart-mind, not just up here, but here. The important thing is to put meaning in your life. And true meaning is to really cultivate a good heart.
I couldn't have ended my trip to India on a better note. I'd like to say my final thoughts, but honestly, I can't sum it up in just a few words. I feel like I just saw enough of India to realize how it was only a glimpse given the overwhelming diversity of this subcontinent. Each state I've traveled to felt like a different country, and in the same way, I wondered just enough to open my mind. It's not that I have all the answers now. If anything, I have more questions. I think I need a little perspective before reflecting on the good and the bad of these 2 months. In the meantime, as you can see, the stunning landscapes of Himachal Pradesh are quietly guiding us towards the next adventure. Nepal.